G'day guys, how's it going? It's Matthew here. With the pre-patched release date being announced as the 17th, which by the time this video is up is probably about to happen, and the Shadow spec unlikely to really see changes between now and 8.1, I figured it'd be a good idea to release a BFA Shadow overview video. In this video, I'll be discussing what has changed for Shadowfiend's BFA, including what we've lost, what we've gained, and what that means for Radiant and Mythic Plus. So first up, what was the Shadow experience in Legion? Shadow in Legion was a spec that kind of evolved as the expansion went on. We started in Emerald Nightmare with some Surrender Madness degeneracy, where everything was baked into that one Void form. We moved to a Railgun Void Bolt spam in Tier 19 Nighthold, where your Void form didn't really matter too much. You still didn't want to drop out early, but if you did, it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't any sync or anything. Then we ended with the cycle for Tier 20 and Tier 21. This is the one that's most familiar to us all. It's the incredibly punishing yet rewarding style where you gotta keep that minute cycle going, and if you fall out early, kinda screwed. But, you know, it was kinda fun at the same time, right? Overall, I think Shadow was a very playable spec in Legion throughout the entire expansion, even Surrender Madness, which was kind of not really fun at all. It still worked. It wasn't until T21 where holes really start to form, where, you know, you needed the specific gear, the specific legendaries to be able to do anything. But besides that, it was pretty good. I think most people can agree on that. The Shadow was fun to play this expansion. Moving on to Shadow in Battle for Azeroth, a good point to start is with the loss of our artifact weapon. Xelatath, Naifu, Zali, whatever you want to call her, and the traits that go along with it. It kind of goes without saying, but we lost Void Torrent as a baseline ability. It has instead been made a talent and moved to level 90 row with a 45-second cooldown. Not really sure how much use it will see there. Most of what we lost were minor buffs to abilities that weren't really be felt, such as increased damage or healing of certain abilities. There were, however, some traits that really complete the spec that we will be losing. Traits such as Mass Hysteria, which is likely a victory for many people, myself included, since it put way too much emphasis on Void Form length and led to that degenerate, punishing style that plagued Legion's shadowy experience. Thrive in the Shadows. Our Dispersion heal, on top of losing from the Shadows our Dispersion CD reduction trait, is a big quality of life loss. Now Dispersion is just a 6-second silence for only a 60% damage reduction on a 2-minute cooldown, which isn't really that good and will likely lead to moments where you continue to rot through Dispersion while the thing that made you disperse isn't really seeing its health drop. We've lost Unleash the Shadows, which is a big nerf to Auspicious Spirits, as well as making us lose all interaction with Vampiric Touch, which kinda sucks. I like it when spells and abilities are improved by interactions with other spells and abilities. The big one for most people, we lost Cordial of Void. Our big Tendril brothers are going to be going into the bin. They didn't really change the way we played, and for the most part were just extra damage and insanity, but the way they jumped in to save the day as we were about to lose sync will never be forgotten. To conclude, in a similar way, we lost Sphere of Insanity, the loud Orby boy that got muted halfway through the expansion. He may not have contributed a lot in damage meters, but he was always there for us. Void Form and the abilities related to it have been hit with a few nerfs, many of which appear to be unnecessary. For example, Void Eruption's cast time has been increased to 2.5 seconds baseline. Void Form's haste gain per stack has been nerfed to 0.5% down from 1% per stack, and Void Form's drain has been increased, making longer Void Forms much harder. The average Void Form length in BFA is going to be around 18 to 20 stacks without Mindbender, and pushing 25 to 30 with it. It would be very rare to go much higher without Surrender Madness. We've had one buff to offset those nerfs, which is that baseline Void Eruption only requires 90 Insanity, down from 100. In this section, I was going to have to include that Void Bolt's dot refresh was unnecessarily nerfed to 2 seconds instead of 3 seconds, but thankfully that was reverted this week. Hopefully we see the other nerfs reverted in the future also, since they definitely feel unnecessary and are a big reason that BFA Shadow feels a bit weird. Our talent trees have been changed with Battle for Azeroth, and we have lost some talents and gained some new ones. Talents we've lost include Masochism, which was a talent that was basically required in High Mythic Plus in Legion. Power Infusion, a talent that didn't get much use after Nighthold when the cycle involving Mindbender replaced it. Dominant Mind, a wasted talent that had so much potential if it worked like Control Undead / Enslaved Demon. There are a few mobs in Legion that would have been very nice to control if it had the same uptime as the other two abilities. To round out the list, we've also lost Void Ray and Reaper of Souls. Void Ray was an ability that I liked, but it was really hard to tell if it was really better than Lingering Insanity due to the jarring loss of haste between Void forms. Some talents keep the same name but work differently, such as Senlayan. It no longer buffs Vampiric Touch damage, instead works as a cooldown reduction on Vampiric Embrace while maintaining the increased Vampiric Embrace healing, it has also been moved to the mobility talent row. Mind Bomb no longer stuns. Instead, it's an AoE fear, which means it breaks on damage and will likely only function as delayed mini-stun on a 30-second cooldown that replaces Psychic Scream. It's not a great look for the ability, which was a staple for Shadow Priest and Mythic Plus. The silver lining is that it allows us to look to the other options on the row, since we don't lose access to our normal AoE fear with those. Shadowed Void. It's been slightly reworked to now function as essentially the legendary belt, which isn't bad, you can't really complain with that. Surrender the Madness. It's received a rework. It still allows casting while moving and 100% increased insanity generation, but it's changed from a 3-minute duration 10-minute cooldown where you die at the end of a void form, to a 1-minute duration 4-minute cooldown where at the end of the buff you take 90% of your HP as damage and are prevented from generating insanity for 30 seconds. The damage can be mitigated, so that's pretty good, it's better than dying. It might see some use, but without mass hysteria, a longer void form doesn't really give anything. Legacy of the Void. Changed from 65 insanity required to erupt and 5% damage increase to 60 insanity required and 40% reduced cast time on Void Eruption. I think Void Eruption's base cast time was nerfed to add something to Legacy of the Void to make it a talent worth taking that wasn't just flat damage, but that's just my tinfoil hat theory. To round out our talent changes, assuming I haven't forgotten anything, we have Lingering Insanity. On live, you lose 2% haste per second. In BFA, you lose 1% per second. It's mostly just to balance out the reduced void form stacks on top of the reduced haste gain per stack. I don't know if it will make the talent worth taking, but at least they tried to prevent it from being a worthless talent outright. Some talents have been nerfed. Twist of Fate has changed from 20% increased damage to only 10%, which is a nerf of 50%, which is pretty big, I think. And also, Auspicious Spirits has been changed from 3 insanity per apparition down to 2 insanity. Combined with less crit from the stat squish and a loss of Empiric Touch apparitions, it's a pretty big nerf to the talent overall. Some old baseline abilities are now talents. As mentioned before, Void Torrent is now a talent on level 90 row with a 45-second cooldown that probably won't see much use. And also, Shadowed Death has been moved to a talent on level 75 row, competing with Auspicious Spirits and Shadow Crash. Disappointingly, it does not have Reaper of Souls baked into it. We've also gained 4 new talents, including 2 crowd control options. The first being Last Word, a 15-second reduced cooldown on Silence, competing against Mind Bomb and Psychic Horror. It's a generic crowd control option with a reduced kick cooldown. It's very handy to have, especially for a class that historically has been able to kick once and then not have it up for the rest of the fight. The other crowd control option is Psychic Horror. It's an ability we've had before, which has been removed and is now returning for Battle for Azeroth. It's a 4-second single target stun on a 45-second cooldown. There's a fair few uses in Mythic Plus, and I think it's great to have it back. Our third new ability is Dark Void. It's a talent on level 45 row and it's competing with Twist of Fate and Misery. It's a 30-second cooldown ability that generates 30 insanity and does some decent burst AoE damage while applying Shadowed Pain to all targets hit. It's a very nice addition and will likely see a lot of use, but to me it's mostly a Battle for Azeroth fix to a Legion problem. It's better late than never, I suppose. Finally, our fourth new talent is the ability Dark Ascension. It's level 100 talent competing with Legacy of the Void and Surrender the Madness. It's on a 60-second cooldown and it functions as an on-demand void form, including Void Eruption, that can be used at any time, including in void form where it resets stacks and drains to the beginning. It took a long time to be implemented properly on beta. At first I didn't like the talent, but I've been using it almost exclusively in dungeons since it was added properly. It's nice on-demand AoE burst, and the drawback of needing 90 insanity and longer Void Eruption cast time due to not taking Legacy of the Void isn't really felt too much. I've only been punished for sitting still and casting a long spell in a few instances, mainly the second boss's Trash and King's Rest. The blob's AoE circles land too quickly to sit still and cast without being hit, and being hit too many times can lead to a quick death. But outside of that, it's an amazing talent. To close out our BFA changes, minus the things I've forgotten, we've gained a couple old abilities back, including Mindseer. It's separate from Mindflay again. It's nice to have some control over our AoE, until they maybe bake it back into Mindflay again a few weeks from now. We've also gained Leap of Faith. Remember that spell? You get to be prepared to use it for its only purpose, saving raid and party members from scary mechanics. Definitely not to interrupt Hearthstones or grip people to their death in LFR. No one would ever use Life Grip for that purpose, right guys? So, now that the changes are out of the way, what is the new Shadow single target and raid experience? I'll be talking in basic terms, since while some preliminary sims have been done, There's nothing really set in stone in terms of rotation, cast priority, stat priority, and I'm not really a theory crafting person, very much into feely craft. I highly recommend checking out the work that people over at How to Priest do for more specific talent choices and builds. I just get my info from them anyway. The spec plays a lot slower thanks to a combination of the stat squish and the Voidform haste stack nerf. Many Shadow Priests will be used to playing with close to 100% haste for a lot of the fight. In Battle for Azeroth, you won't see anything even close to those numbers. Like Runus in Azuna, we're a bunch of addicts, and playing BFA Shadow will definitely trigger some withdrawal symptoms as you get used to the slower casting style and start to miss the old high APM style Legion. As someone who has played beta for a while now, I can tell you, you do get used to the haste. Eventually. Thanks to the reversion of the Voidbolt dot extension nerf this week, it may not be as big of an issue, but you may have to get used to recasting dots again, as our lower haste values result in not enough Voidbolts being cast during a Void form. It may not be as big of an issue on single target, but it spells problems with multi-target split cleave, as maintaining dots on multiple targets will become significantly harder, and many globals will be spent dotting. At this stage, there isn't an obvious cycle like there was for the last year or so of Shadow. There is potential for one with some specific Azerite traits, such as Whispers of the Damned and Chorus of Insanity combo with Dark Ascension. I'm not sure if that will be the way Shadow goes, or if it'd even be a good thing. A cycle leads to punishment when it comes to downtime and raid mechanics, and as we all know from the last 2 tiers of Legion, that's not a fun time. Historically to me, Shadow has been a ranged execute class. That was our class identity, with Twist of Fate and Shadow of Death ensuring that we do more damage when a fight is drawing to a close. Thanks to the nerf to Twist of Fate and Shadow of Death being moved to a talent, it greatly reduces the effectiveness of our execute, in my opinion leaves Shadow in a spot where it's okay to few things, but doesn't feel a specific role like it used to. It's not a great place to be, but it isn't the end of the world as many are saying. I don't think you need to re-roll away from Shadow, assuming the damage tune makes it competitive. It's definitely playable. It definitely feels like they spent more time in the development of Battle for Azeroth fixing one of Shadow's major weaknesses in Legion, our AoE. It was abysmal, and near the end of the expansion, where to beat higher key timers you need to pull more, Shadow fell behind quickly. I'm happy to say things are appearing to be a lot better for Shadow in Battle for Azeroth on the Mythic Plus front. Our toolkit is way better, and it's exciting to see where Shadow can go. Maybe we'll make it to an MDI regional stage this time, or further. With Dark Void, Void Eruption, Dark Ascension, and Shadow Crash, we have amazing burst potential. This does lead to a small weakness where we kind of peter out while those abilities on cooldown and it's just AFK C spamming and a slight damage drop off, but it's still pretty good. There is a slight awkward timing where it might be beneficial to just idle for a few seconds and drop out of Void form in order to get another eruption off. I haven't experienced that often, but the temptation has been there, which I kind of don't like at all. When running Dark Void, it also feels bad to cast Vampiric Touch, since it doesn't interact with anything we do, and while it definitely is a DPS gain to cast it, in some circumstances, it also feels like we'd be better off just spamming Mindseer. I've enjoyed running Misery instead of Dark Void, but it's hard to say if Misery is only feeling better because I haven't been doing keys with groups that can demolish mobs, so my dots actually get time to reach the point where casting them was worth it. Our utility is also a lot more valuable. Dungeon mobs have a lot of things to dispel, both magical and disease, so Mass Dispel and Purify Disease will see use. I don't really understand the nerf to Mass Dispel's cooldown. It's strange to see a spell go from no cooldown to 45 seconds without changing it at all throughout the expansions. It's a valuable spell in BFA regardless. While our toolkit overall has improved, there are weaknesses. The loss of Mind Bomb as an AoE stun will be felt. However, it opens doors for our CC, since not only do we get Psychic Scream on a 60-second cooldown, we get the option of taking Last Word for a shorter CD kick, or Psychic Horror for a single target stun on a mob that either can't be interrupted or is fixated on someone. Our survivability has taken a bit of a beating. While I haven't done any keys yet where I've died due to lack of survivability, I can feel that time coming. Dispersion is still a strong enough defensive with 60% damage reduction, but it no longer heals, which is kind of why it was nerfed in the first place from 90%. That, and to allow pure shadows to exist as a PvP talent. On top of that, thanks to the loss of the artifact traits, it also has an increased cooldown. So we have a weaker dispersion with a longer cooldown, which really sucks. I'm not sure if Masochism will be missed, as 10% damage reduction was a low amount, and while it was required to survive hard hitting abilities in Legion, in Battle for Azeroth a lot of the bosses with big hitting abilities do percent damage instead, which is a whole other can of worms in terms of scaling balance. So the requirement of intense survivability items/abilities has been reduced. Overall, I'm very happy with how Shadow is traveling in BFA in terms of Mythic Plus, and I'm hopeful for our viability long term. 8.1. The day every Shadow Priest is waiting for. The day sometime near the end of this year where we get fixed. I don't really enjoy the position we're in, where we're hoping for damage tuning to act as a band-aid until those changes can arrive. I hope uploading this video acts as a jinx of sorts, and the moment I upload it, Blizzard releases some last-minute surgical changes that would put Shadow in good stead. It kind of already has, as I had started writing this script before the Voidbolt refresh reversion, and I had to change some things thanks to it. But what would those changes look like? The pipe dream is for Voidform to be removed and for Shadow to go back to being a generic builder spender caster with Shadow Orbs or mini Boomkins with Insanity acting as astral power, or something kind of similar to Ellipsis's rework, which I recommend you check out from How to Priest. If you ask him, I'm sure he'll let you know. Of course, both those things are too big of a rework for a mid-expansion patch, and it's something that we would really have to wait until 9.0. Truly, to put Shadow in a nice spot playstyle-wise, you really just have to revert most of the nerfs thrown at us. Some changes I'd like to see besides the nerf reversions are things like Shadow of Death either being moved back to baseline or having either Twist of Fate or Twist of Fate and Reaper of Souls baked into it. You know, something like you get Twist of Fate for 9 seconds when Death is used. I mostly just want our Execute back and to feel good taking it. I'd also like some interaction with Vampiric Touch. Like I said earlier, it feels bad to cast Vampiric Touch because it doesn't interact with the rest of our toolkit. Even something as simple as making Unleash the Shadows baseline could remedy that situation. There are more changes that could be done, but since this video, I want to keep it kind of brief-ish. I don't really want to turn into one of those unreasonable videos where it just develops into a whine fest about how bad my spec is and whatnot. I think mostly we all just really want to avoid that situation where we become the demo warlocks of Battle for Azeroth. That is, where we're told early on in the expansion that our spec requires a large rework and we won't begin it until the next expansion. I don't think we're in bad a spot as demo locks were in Legion, but it's a situation I'd like to avoid overall. In conclusion, you've heard from many people that Shadow is in a bad state, and truthfully, that's the case for Raid and the single target experience. It's clunky and slow and the exact opposite of the fluid playstyle we had near the end of Legion, but it isn't unplayable. It's not a doomsday scenario where you have to re-roll or bench yourself until 8.1. Outside of Raids, Shadow is looking to be viable in Mythic Plus, at least based on our toolkit. In the end, damage tune will decide most things, but we have what we need to not just get instant decline when queuing up for a key. I'll be looking to main Shadow in BFA, and I hope that a lot of you will join me on that journey. Thanks for watching, feel free to post your comments on Shadow and BFA down below, and let me know how you feel we're heading to the expansion, and what you want to see change in 8.1. Also, one last thing, I started streaming. You can find me at twitch.tv/Matthew2 with an X instead of an E. The link is in the description below. The quality isn't great because my upload isn't great, and I probably won't have a set schedule for a while, but I'll stream when I can, and I hope you stop by. Thanks for watching.